Good evening, Praise Chapel Fresno, and all those of you tuning in tonight, wherever you're tuning in at, whatever you're tuning in on, we just appreciate that you guys are here with us this evening. Still going through the book of Revelations, but just remember you can continue to support this ministry, this move with your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts that you can do digitally on your smartphone app with Easy Tithe. You can also go to easytithe.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno. You'll see exactly which one you can give on. Or you can go to praisechapelfresno.com, click the menu button in the upper right-hand corner, go down to where you see Give. It's going to take you to a safe and secure third-party website we're contracted with for safe contributions. Or if you're joining us on our in-person services, you can always drop off your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts, and our tithes and offering box that is located just outside the sanctuary. Still trying to limit that person-to-person contact. We used to back in the day, you pass the basket around. But just due to the fact that, we're still trying to keep things relatively distant socially and making sure that we're sanitizing things still. Which is just basic good health practices anyway. We don't have the basket going around, so we have the box just outside the sanctuary for you to drop it off in with an envelope behind every single chair for you to continue to make sure that gets reported for your tax purposes. You can also drop off or mail in your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts to the physical address of the campus. If you don't know what that is, just Google Praise Chapel Fresno, California. You'll see our physical address, and you can continue to contribute that way. We'll make sure it gets deposited in a timely manner. Excuse me, I'm playing with the microphone a lot, but each Sunday I'm trying to perfect exactly where the thing sits for my voice. So it looks like I'm always kind of playing around with it, but it's just to make sure that there's a nice audible sound for you guys, and it's not too close to my mouth to where you hear my lips smack and making banana noises. That's a banana noise, excuse me. But we're still in the book of Revelations. I'm choking on the water I just drank. So we're just about to get into some really amazing things that are happening inside of the book of Revelation. So when people think of the book of Revelations, they always think about the seals, the horsemen, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They think about the bowls being poured out, God's wrath, these kind of things. And chapter 6 is kind of the epitome. It's the beginning of what we're about to see when it comes to the foretelling of the great tribulation that's happening. Now remember, we are taking this for what is being written. We're taking this as it's not reciting history, but that it is something of yet to come. Because an apocalyptic style of writing, it's about an 80% time where they're prophesying towards something that is about to happen. So when we're talking about these seals, when we're going through them, we're seeing this as something that has yet to come, something that is yet to happen. So there are multiple different ways that you can read this, that you can look into it, that if you were to look up how other people see it or how other people interpret it, it's going to come up with this whole version of things that have already happened. They're going to give examples, things that were happening at that time, which there will be examples. And then basically when it comes to things that have yet to happen, everybody just starts making up their own stuff. But as you see, when we go through each one of these, there have been notable periods of time or of our own history that we can look at that and say, well, is that what that was? And basically what this is coming down to is it's coming down to hearing the voice of the Lord. So it's not really about we're going to look at a specific event that happens, because what we know happens is the great trumpet gets blown, and those that understand or know what's going on, they will hear it. And we've talked about that in the beginning of a chapter, that it's really, it may be that everybody hears it, or it may be just those in faith hear it. But what we do know is that there'll be a voice that's going to come from the heavens. So when we look at this and you say, well, that was World War II, or that was World War I, or that was happening. Yeah, but was there any evidence that God had unleashed, or God had opened up and had spoken prior to these events happening? And as all of recorded history in the church, I don't really see that portion of it. So we're going to continue to go with that. These are things that have yet to come. So let's look at verses 1 and 2 of chapter 6. And it says, "Now I," this is John, "watched when the Lamb, who's Jesus, opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 creatures," that's the cherubim, "say with a voice like thunder, 'Come.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. And its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer." So the first thing John sees, when we look at the previous chapter, we understand that this is the scroll, this is the history and the destiny of mankind and all of creation, that Jesus is the Lamb, and he's going to open this. So the first thing people do is they say it's a white horse. There's interpretations, and people say that's Jesus. Well, it's not Jesus when you look at it. Immediately we think of it as Jesus because in Revelations 19 it's going to mention Jesus on a horse. And if you've read ahead, Eager Beaver, you've jumped ahead and you've read these things. Just in chapter 19, Jesus is going to be on a white horse. But at this, it's based off of John's interpretation. This is a satanic imitation of Jesus Christ, or what we would call the Antichrist. Here are the clues. It says he rules with a bow, not a sword. It says he comes to conquer. He's the conqueror who comes to conquer when Jesus is called the conqueror. He's already conquered, and this rider comes to bring war while Jesus came to bring peace. So the contrast of the opposites is why we label it the Antichrist. So this first one that comes out, this first rider on the white horse, we see this as the Antichrist. The idea of a satanic dictator over men goes all the way back to an emperor named Nimrod. He was the ruler over Babel, in Genesis chapter 10, where it says that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. This has a sense that he was a mighty hunter of men, but what he did is he led people into open rebellion against God. So when they're referencing this point of Nimrod being, he's ruling with the bow, John is drawing it back to the history that he knows, that this was someone that is standing against God. It's opposite of Jesus Christ. So he's giving imagery of what he can interpret from what he's seeing. He'll rule over men as a false Messiah, and he'll lead men into organized rebellion against God. So the first seal being opened brings this dictator to prominence. It announces him coming out. So when the first seal gets broken, Antichrist, he comes out on a white horse. Then let's look at verses 3 and 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." That's the living creatures, the cherubim. And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. So you can see how people would, the church in their days would look at something like World War II, being this seal being broken, being the second seal, because they would say, well, man was slaying man, millions were dying, and this could be interpreted in that way. But there was no great voice that came aloud that called up to Christians. There was none of that happening at that time. So we can infer this is still as yet to come. So the red horse, he brings war. The rider didn't need to bring war and destruction. All he needed to do was remove peace from the earth. Once this peace, which was God's gift to man through Jesus Christ, was taken, men quickly rush into a war and destruction. Peace between man and God among nations, we have to see this as a gift from God. When there's peace, it's not the natural state of relations between men. We war, Cain and Abel. First one's out. One didn't like the way that God favored him, and so he kills him. Men were built and designed. Once the fall of man happened and sin entered the earth, mankind was destined to fight one another. So anytime that there's peace between nations, we as Christians see that as a gift from God. And the second rider, once that seal is broken, he comes to remove that peace from all nations. Again, a lot of people say this was the Second World War. This could have been the First and the Second World War, but they're saying that would have been like synonymous with one another. But again, we're going as if as this is yet to come. It's the authority was granted to this horseman. It says he was permitted to take the peace. It's not. This is directly or indirectly God's judgment on the earth, because it says he's permitted to do this. So in essence, He's allowing this person to remove peace from the earth to cause these wars. That people should slay one another. Our modern age is marked by war and conflict. We can see this happening right now in the Ukraine. Continue to pray for Ukraine as they continue to push back Russia. But we can see it with since World War II, there have been more than 150 wars of some kind happening across this world. And at any given time, there may be some of 36 armed conflicts taking the lives of thousands of people every year. The nations of the world often spend more than $1 trillion a year on military expenditures. Revelations 5 and 6 When he, Jesus, opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature, the cherubim, say, "Come." I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, meaning the cherubim, saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." This one takes a lot more interpretation of what John is trying to say. The first thing that you have to draw attention to is the scales. This isn't scales like a snake. This is scales like Lady Liberty holds, or Lady Justice, holds to weigh out truth and lies. So this black horse comes to bring imbalance into the world. The scales symbolize the need to carefully measure the rations of food. This speaks of a time of scarcity, of famine. The prices mentioned they're about 12 times higher than the costs of their day. So it's not just mentioning that there's inflation where we're looking at 8, 9, and 10%. They're talking it's 12 times its worth. So they're saying this is a huge gap from affordability and poverty. This describes a time of famine when life will be reduced to the barest of necessities. When I was going through this, a lot of younger Christians seem to think that this time of isolation and stay-at-home orders and those kinds of things during this vid time, that they were saying, well, that's prophecy. That was happening from Revelations. And I think they're adorable because they saw as the bare necessities were, Wi-Fi at home, DoorDash, these kind of things. So I thought it was absolutely adorable that the younger generation sees the bare necessities as still having access to excess and still saw it as the bare necessities. But however, the nicer things in this time frame that that they're seeing, all of the excess and all that is still going to be available to the overly wealthy. It talks about do no harm to the oil and to the wine. So those aren't going to be harmed, and it's basically, we're looking at it as like the 1%ers, right? They're still going to be able to live completely normal while basically the rest of the world is going to be in this sense where it's a day-to-day struggle just to stay alive, just to eat that day. We often see a great famine in the world today. Fewer people suffer from hunger today than 100 years ago. But the understanding is that the world is in a perilous and precautious ecological balance. We see this happening right now with what's going on in Ukraine, like the breadbasket of the world. And you can see how it's created. This one single conflict has created this great imbalance between the world economy, between the Russian economy. You can kind of see exactly what's happening and how the world is responding to this event, but how quickly this world can become absolutely imbalanced. And you can see we kind of just adapt to it. Back when I was in Washington, D.C., when gas hit $5 a gallon, there were maybe 1 in 6 or 7 gas stations open because people just weren't buying gas. And it was at 5:15 when I was over there. It would have been about 2003, 2004, or 2003 is when it would have hit over $5 a gallon in Washington, D.C. And there was nobody on the roads. Everyone was staying at home, and there was only 1 in every 6 gas stations that was open. And here, we're looking at 5. I pass by one every day when I go to work, and it was 5:49 today, and there were more people on the road. We're still having traffic. So we just kind of adapt to this. What we're talking about when this seal is broken is it is a complete imbalance between the world economy and what people can afford. So it's not just talking about, you're going to have to pay, more for gas and you're going to have to pay more for this. It's going to be like the things that we see as normal will only be affordable by those that are in the extreme wealthy class. That they'll be able to continue to live in a certain lifestyle that we would probably see as normal while the rest of the world is attempting to try to get by and struggle. Verses 7 and 8, it says, when he opened the fourth seal, meaning Jesus, I heard a voice from the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and with the wild beasts of the earth. So once this one comes, a fourth of the population of the world is wiped out. And this is used in quite a few different songs that are out there. It's quoted in quite a few different movies. They quote this one verse. But the pale horse and death, the last rider, shows that there's going to be a tremendous death toll from this dictatorship. War, famine, other calamities described by the previous three horsemen. Power was given to the horsemen and given by God. Though all hell will break loose on the earth, what we see is that God is still very much in control. He still holds the scrolls, and he still is the one opening the seals. So none of this is just happening, and we're like, God, where are you? This is God saying, like, I have ordained this to happen. I have given the power. I've given the authority. Verse 9, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness by the witness they had borne. This is talking about martyrs, those that have gone before, that have been executed for holding to their faith. But it talks about them being under the altar, and that does take a little bit more of sticking to that apocalyptic style of interpretation and writing. It's talking about those that have labored before God and the martyrs, that their souls were under the altar, emphasizing that their lifeblood was poured out as an offering to God. So they just didn't walk up and say, well, I said it and I can't take it back. Like, oh, like no takesies, backsies. This is basically like, I gave my life for God. So it was a sacrifice to God for them to give. So when it's talking about under the altar, it's meaning that their blood was poured out for God, as an offering. The idea is drawing from Leviticus. It's 4:7, and it says, and he shall pour the remaining blood at the base of the altar of the burnt offering. So it's just kind of following through with that they gave their lives to God and their blood was poured out. These are the cries of all martyrs for God's truth, not just in John's time. This is those that will pass from John's time into ours, and even future, that those that have given their lives because they would not, that they were working for God, or they wouldn't give up the name of Jesus Christ. Not merely believers persecuted by the coming world leaders, meaning the first horsemen. This is just throughout all of time. And through that, there's something I didn't really go over because I didn't, in the time that I was writing this, I really didn't see it, but it only rings true even now, is that these martyrs will talk about wanting to be drawn up into heaven, and God, it says that God gives them these white robes, that he's identifying them as they're going up, but he tells them to wait a little longer. And I think that's really important, because there's some people that just say like, well, we want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do this. And sometimes we really have to pray, and we have to stick to God's timing and wait for the word to go, because God's telling these people that are in the midst of these calamities, that have given their lives for it, and he's telling them, just tarry a little bit longer for me. So he has his time, he has his set, and we just need to follow that. Then verse 12 and 13. When he opened the sixth seal, meaning Jesus, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. So it talks about these great calamities. In the Bible, celestial events and disturbances are often connected with the coming of Jesus Christ, of the Messiah. It happens in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, I want to say Zechariah, but I think it's Zephaniah. And Jesus himself really describes these things in Matthew 24. Chapter 24, it's verses 7 through 9. So John didn't use technically precise scientific language. He was specifically he was explaining what he was seeing, that the earth was shaking, that the sun was no longer giving light, that the moon itself had the appearance of blood. A total eclipse of the sun, the moon at times that we see in our own times right now, is we see that sometimes they have what's called a blood moon, where the moon is red. And the meteors described as falling to the earth. So he's not talking about the sun or the stars themselves have fallen. So the idea here is that the earth shakes so violently, and people are saying it throws up so much dust, so much dirt and debris, that he won't be able to see the stars, but that things will be falling to the earth. And this is thought of as basically like asteroids or meteors falling to the earth. Verse 14 says, then the sky vanished like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. So this one, as I was reading through a bunch of people's interpretations, there's basically like from left to right. So Pastor Will did his own kind of study on this. And one of the most devastating events that happens during an earthquake is in certain parts that are really close to the epicenter, the ground basically gets loosened to a point that it has a fluid-like consistency and it moves like fluid. So it's possible that what John is seeing is he's seeing the earth waving, and through his view, it's coming up and down, and he's because he says it goes like a scroll being drawn up. So it gives this idea that there's something moving up. And so that's where that comes from. And that's basically what I kind of think, because he's doing a literal interpretation right here. When he mentions the sky shaking, the sun, or the earth shaking, the sun, the moon, he's describing literal events that he can see. But now he doesn't really understand what he's seeing, because he says it's as if the sky was rolled up into the heavens. Meaning what he was seeing, what was sky looks like it went up. Well, if the earth is moving, it would appear as if the sky moved up and it's out of his view. Also, as I was going through, I started kind of focusing in where it says every mountain and island removed from its place. Again, that can come from a violent shifting of seismic tectonic plates. But we can also look at this as, too, think about what we've seen with different tsunamis that have hit and devastated other countries. Is it would appear as if the water suddenly just rises, like the sky would disappear, and he's looking, so we can see that this is a direct correlation, and it is directly correlated with the earth shaking. So we can say it's either that portion that he's seeing the land move. We've all watched San Andreas. And it also could be a fact that he's now witnessing water, because it mentions islands being removed from their place. It talks about mountains being removed from their place. And the number one thing that you can see with the tsunami is even at the highest of heights, you might not be safe when it comes to water rushing onto land because of a seismic event that happened underwater. So again, he goes from describing literal events that he can see to now he's just kind of saying what he sees. Because it goes from the earth began to shake, the sun darkened, the moon was blood. Then it's like, it was like the earth, or it was the heavens kind of like rolled up into the sky. I don't really know. And I mean, a lot of different things were happening. So he's just describing basically what he can see, because he doesn't understand exactly what he saw. And then we look at verses 15 and 17. It says, then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountain, calling to the mountain rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? One of the most important things we need to take from here, it says everyone on the earth begins to cry out that this is the day of judgment. So this would mean to us that everyone will hear, everyone will know that this event is happening and this is God doing this. So everyone has heard. All the people are brought equally low in the wrath of God. The judgment, because it mentions generals, rich, those slaves, free, whoever it is, they're all going to be at the same level, hiding in the same caves, crying out. They hid not only from the terror of the judgments, but from the face of him who sits on the throne. What sinners dread most is not death, but the revealed presence of God. What people fear the most isn't the fact that it's death, it's what comes after that. And for those that have fallen away, it's not going to be the fact that this is happening. It's going to be the fact that now it's been revealed as what they've heard, or possibly what they've walked away from, is real. The first 6 seals are the summary judgment, or the summary of judgments distributed over the whole book. A brief summary of what will occur on the day of the Lord up to the time of his actual apocalypse or unveiling, which happens in chapter 19. That span begins with the revelation of the Antichrist. So this chapter starts off with the revealing of the Antichrist, and then it concludes with the revealing of the face of him who sits on the throne. So it's basically giving us a quick play-by-play thing of what happens, and then the rest of the chapters go a bit more in detail, actually extensively more in detail of things that happen. So what I'm taking from this book right here is just what we look at sometimes and what we try to interpret and say, because everyone says like, oh, we're in the last days, we're in the last days. Well, the day that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, the clock started. So we have to look at it from a time of not, are we going to look for these signs and wait for them to happen before we take things seriously, or are we going to wait for these signs to be one of those ones that cries out and says, save us from the wrath of God? Or is it going to be that we're just going to continue to work and labor for the word of God, labor for God, do whatever we can with the time that we have available to save as many as we can, to get out there and touch the lives of every individual we come into contact with, so that we're not worried about the time. And that's what everyone says, well, how do we know? How do we know? You know what? I don't care, because I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to continue to spread the name of Jesus Christ regardless of the time that we're in. And I think that's something we have to take from this book too, is that there's not one time that John is sitting there and is saying, I wish I had done more. John is saying, I'm just standing back here and I'm witnessing what's going on. But I think it's really kind of an alarm to us to say, like, don't worry about what's happening next or when is it going to happen, just in the sense that we're being diligent with the time that God has given us. So we thank you guys for joining us tonight. Remember, you can continue to support this ministry, give via tithes, offerings, love gifts. And you can do that digitally on your smartphone app, or you can go to easytide.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno, and you'll see which one you can give to. You can also go to praisechapelfresno.com, click the menu in the upper right-hand corner, go down to where you see Give, and it's going to take you to another website, third party that we're contracted with, safe and secure. Or you can continue to mail in, drop off your tithes or offerings, your love gifts to the physical address of the campus. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google Praise Chapel Fresno, California. You're going to see exactly which one you can give to. Or if you're joining us on our in-person services, you can do so with the offering envelopes that are located behind every chair that we can drop off in. Don't forget Easter service. We're going to have 2 services starting at 9. The first one starting at 9:30. The second one starting at 11. So we just want to make room for those that maybe want to come to church and might not feel comfortable with having a lot of people together. Or we're making room for you to bring all those people that you've been sitting at home going, man, I really should reach out to them and invite them to church. Easter is basically the Christian Super Bowl. We're going to want everyone to take part in it. We'll be partaking in communion. We'll be going through things. It's going to be a wonderful time here in church. Great messages, great music, everything. So just reach out to people, start just investing in them now. Start saying, I'm not going to let go until you come to church, whether it's on Easter or whether it's before that. We love them anyway. We love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you guys Sunday, 10 o'clock or live casted.